Welcome to the third video. In this part of the session, I'll help you to understand where your practice stands. You will need to have your second assignment printed with you to take up the exercises and evaluate your practice stage. This video is a bit lengthy, but do watch it in one stretch to understand everything clearly. So finally, the most awaited question: what are the stages of dental practice? So the 5 stages of dental practice are introduction, growth, maturity, saturation, and finally the last stage is decline. Now our next step is to understand all these stages and see which stage of practice you belong to. We will discriminate each stage with 5 differentiating factors to clearly understand all the stages. The 5 discriminating factors of dental practice stages are finance, personal life, work life, your priorities and attitude, and the 5th factor is the key factors. Now before we proceed further, let me explain how you have to use the worksheet during this video. As you can see, there are a total 6 pages. One page for each stage and the last page is for conclusion. Now let's see what exactly you have to do with the worksheet. You must be able to see a scale of 1 to 5 on top of your assignment sheet. On this scale, the score 1 determines not true and 5 determines absolutely true. I'll explain 5 factors for each stage and you have to give yourself a score for each factor. Now let's see how to record the score. If you are able to correlate with the situation and that determines your current practice status, I repeat, your current practice status, then you should give yourself a high score, that is 5, absolutely true. And if that's not your present situation, then give it a low score of 1, that is not true. If you are dicey and not sure, then you can mark the score somewhere in between depending on level of relatedness. Alright, so you will have to record a score for each factor. So there are total 5 scores for each stage, and then you have to sum it up and write down the final score, final total score in the respective box. For each stage, your highest score can be 25 and the lowest can be 5. I hope you have understood my instructions clearly. If no, just repeat this part again before moving forward. Now please note, whatever analysis I am sharing with you today, it's after my interaction with thousands of dentists and it applies to most of them, but not necessarily will be 100% true in your case. There can always be some exceptions. So I recommend correlating and seeing what goes closely with your present situation. Alright, so let's start with the first stage, that is introduction. Just try to remember the initial years of your practice, the first few months. A new dental practice always starts with the introduction stage. Most dentists in this stage are in the age group of 25 to 30 years. You might have started your clinic after completing your graduation or post-graduation. Some dentists take up a job before setting up their own clinic, and I have also noticed that a good number of females start their own practice if they marry a non-dentist. Now, in case if you are a second generation dentist or married to an established dental practitioner, and if you continue in the same place, then it's very less likely for you to experience the introduction stage and its hardship, as this phase is already taken care by your spouse, father or mother. Now let's talk about the first differentiating factor, that is finance. How do you arrange funds to set up your practice? If you open a practice after job or consulting for some time, then you have the option to invest your savings. And if you start directly, then you have to borrow money from your parents, family members, friends, or take a bank loan. Now finally, after investing everything you had in your clinic, all you're left with is some unanswered questions like, will patients come? Whether I'll be able to pay the clinic rent? Will I be able to pay the staff salaries? Will I have something left for me at the month end? There is uncertainty about what's going to happen and a complete uncertainty about finances. You're not even sure if you will be able to meet your basic expenses to keep the show running. Now let's record the score for this situation. If you are currently facing this problem every month, then mark your score as 5. If something like this is happening once in a few years, then record the lowest score as not true. Now let's discuss the second factor, the personal life. In the introduction stage, most males have to take care of parents and sometimes siblings because most dentists are bachelors. The clinic is the first opportunity to earn for many dentists, with exception to consultants. And unless you earn, how will you marry? Now, in case of married females, there are added responsibilities as they have to play the roles as a wife, daughter-in-law and a mother. Now, if you are the primary source of income for the family, then it's really a big challenge for the initial days. Possibly such people are under far more stress and pressure than those who are the secondary source of income. Are your present responsibilities limited to what I mentioned? If yes, mark your score accordingly. Now let's talk about the third factor, work life. In the introduction stage, work life is highly unstable. Of course, there are multiple reasons for it. You have to adjust with the new setup, hire staff, treat patients, deal with dental labs, and so on. And like I mentioned earlier, there is a financial crunch already. And on the top of that, the number of patients is low in the initial days. In order to balance everything, you have to work with limited staff. At times, you may have to do each and everything in your practice, including dusting your cabin yourself. And there is nothing wrong in it. You may wish, but you can't invest heavily in learning or upgrading yourself. Most first generation dentists have to go through this. Is this true in your case? Just mark your score. The fourth differentiating factor is your priorities and attitude. In introduction stage, your priority is to establish the practice and create your identity. It requires your personal involvement and makes your presence in family functions, meeting with friends go rare. Now, if you talk about your attitude towards patients, you are very optimistic. I'll give you two examples. First, sometimes you are very sure that the patient won't get ready for treatment. You realize that he has come for window shopping, but you don't give up. You try to consult and convince the patient to best of your abilities in the hope that he might come to you somewhere in the future. The second example, say you are about to close for the day and suddenly the phone rings. The person on the other side of call, he wants to consult you at that point of time and it's not an emergency. Now you have a choice to ask the patient to come down the next day, but somehow you can't say no. You just ask the patient to come down quickly. Is it true in your case? Just record your score. Ever wondered why can't you say no or refuse the patients? It's because in introduction, the patient flow is already low and you can't afford to lose any opportunity. Most dentists who started from scratch as a first generation dentist have to go through all of this, and I'm sure they'll be able to correlate with me and what I'm saying. Now, if you are facing this even after being into practice for many years, then there is something wrong that you need to fix. We will discuss this in the next video. Now let's talk about the fifth factor, that is the key differentiating factor. The typical characteristics that separates introduction stage from other stages include financial uncertainty. You're not even sure if you'll be able to meet your day-to-day expenses to run the practice or not. You have already taken up high risk by putting in everything and you are not in capacity to take further risk. Is it true in your case? Just record your score accordingly. Alright, so now you have recorded the score for all the 5 factors in the introduction stage. Now sum them up and write down the total score in the respective box that you will see in the assignment sheet. Now let's discuss some frequently asked questions about introduction stage. So first question, how long does the introduction stage last? In majority cases, it is between 1 to 3 years. In some cases, it can be as small as just 1 year and it can also extend till 5 years. Of course, there are reasons for it and we are going to discuss it later. The second question, I have recently started second practice. Which stage would it be? Remember one thing, any new practice, say if it is your second clinic or you're shifting the existing practice to a new city or in a different location, which is far from your existing practice, it will start in introduction stage. So what does this mean? This means that the practice growth strategy and the blueprint that you would require for your existing practice and the new practice are going to be different. We will discuss this in detail in the upcoming videos. The third question, what's the sign that you have moved from introduction stage? It's very simple. If you are able to generate more than what it takes to keep your practice alive, then that means you have moved on to some other stage. But remember, you can draw this conclusion only after evaluating your income for at least a year. I'm also asked, how should I shift my stage? Don't worry, we are going to discuss this for all the stages in the next video. I hope you are clear with the first stage of practice. If you are able to correlate with any factor in the present situation, then score yourself accordingly. Now let's see the growth stage. Turn your assignment page and let's get started. So majority of dentists enter the growth stage in their 30s, but someone has said it rightly. Age is just an issue of mind over matter. If you don't mind, it doesn't matter. And that's true for the growth stage. You can be in the growth stage at any point of time in your life. It depends on what exactly you are doing for your practice. Alright, so now let's discuss the factors one by one, starting with finance. In the growth stage, you don't have complete financial uncertainty like it's there in the introduction stage. Although your expenses are on the rise, still you don't have to struggle to maintain your basic lifestyle like paying bills, rent, EMI, staff salaries, etc. as your balance sheet starts getting stronger and stronger. One of the biggest issues in the growth stage is fluctuation of income. See, 10 or 20% variation in income is always anticipated, but there is a sharp increase and decrease in your income in the growth stage. Let me give you an example. In 1 month, the revenue is 100. Next month, it touches 200. Then it comes down to 75 and it may touch again somewhere around 150 in the next month. Are you experiencing such ups and downs in practice? Mark your answer accordingly. Now let's move on to the second factor, that is personal life. It's the growth stage when most male dentists get married and things don't remain the same. You have to maintain your new relations, in-laws. You have to be available for family functions, which otherwise was not mandatory when you were in the introduction stage. And if you expand your family further, it adds to your responsibilities further. After having kids, you get super busy mom or dad. You cannot avoid vaccination schedules, parent-teacher meetings, taking them for outing, etc. This makes time as the biggest constraint. We saw that you grow financially in this stage, but at the same time, your expenses also increase due to these added responsibilities. Well, this doesn't mean that I'm asking you not to get married or not to have kids. The point is, you have to continue working hard like you work in the introduction stage to match with your increased personal responsibilities and expenses. Is this true for you right now? Please mark your score. Now let's talk about the third factor, work life. In the growth stage, you observe an increase in your patient flow. This happens because you start building rapport with the people around your practice and they start recognizing you. You start getting references from your existing patients and physicians around, but then it makes you busier than what you were in the introduction stage. Although patients increase, but you are still a one-man army because most dentists in the growth stage don't believe in work delegation. They focus on treating patients themselves and end up doing things that they are not supposed to do otherwise. The primary reason for this is that you believe that you can do it better than others. And that's why you have to troubleshoot each and everything in your practice which makes your work life difficult. Are you going through this situation right now? Mark your score accordingly. Now let's move to the fourth differentiating factor, that is priorities and attitude. If we talk about priorities, most dentists in growth stage are confused between personal life and work life. Most of your patients are not ready to get treated by other doctors in your team, and your spouse, kids and parents want your attention. Now you are confused if you should give more time to your family or to practice. So in short, there is an imbalance in your personal and professional life. Now if we talk about your attitude towards patients, it's the same as it was there in the introduction stage. You are very optimistic, you entertain each and every patient. Now you must be thinking that there is enough patient flow, then why you still optimistic? The reason is simple. Number of patients is increased, but your expenses also shoot up because of added family responsibilities. In order to keep with all your needs, you end up working extra. Is this true for you? Record your score for this situation. Now let's discuss the fifth and the last point, the key factors. The typical characteristic that discriminates growth stage from other stages are imbalance in your personal and professional life. Your life gets super busy. You are one-man army because you are either not willing to delegate the work or your delegation efforts fails. You have money but you don't have enough time to enjoy it. Do you have to face this? If yes, mark your score as absolutely true. If no, just score 1. Now let's discuss the frequently asked questions. First, how long one can be in the growth stage? Typically, it starts after being in the introduction stage for 2-3 years. You can be in growth stage as long as you choose to be. It will last till the time you learn to work delegation and managerial skills. Second, how much growth is observed in this stage? Well, it varies practice to practice. To give you some idea, it can be in the range of 20% to 100% or even more year on year growth. It all depends on you and what you are doing. Alright, so now let's move on to the third stage, that is maturity. You may enter the maturity stage depending on the way you work and not on your age. It's possible that you enter the maturity stage right after 2-3 years in the growth stage. And it is also possible that you may never experience the maturity stage and jump directly to other stages. You will understand this better as we discuss more about all these stages. Alright, so let's talk about the first discriminating factor, that is finance. In maturity, your finances are stable. There's constant income flow. The growth might be relatively slow, but the best thing is there are minimum or relatively less fluctuations as compared to the growth stage. Say for example, if your income is 200 this year, it will go 220 next year and 240 in the subsequent years. You have enough corpus to invest in dentistry, like hiring more staff, buying advanced dental gadgets, spending on marketing and other personal interests like upgrading your car, home, etc. Are you experiencing such financial freedom or financial status in your practice now? If yes, your score will be high. If no, then it will be on the lower side. Now let's see the second factor, personal life. As we discussed earlier, in growth stage, you have money, but because you have to do everything on your own, time is the biggest constraint. However, that's not the case in the maturity stage. In maturity stage, you experience best version of your personal life. You can have good personal time with family members and friends because both your practice and your kids are in autopilot mode. When I say autopilot mode, I mean that your kids are grown up and you have to give them their own space. In short, you will be saving on your own time. And when it comes to your practice can run efficiently even in your absence. We are going to discuss more about this when we discuss the next factor. The most troubling question of introduction and growth stage is whether I should give more time to family or practice. But you no more have to face it in maturity stage as you have balanced it well with maturity stage. Are you enjoying this beautiful phase of practice right now? Please mark your score. Let's discuss the third factor, work life. Like I mentioned, in the introduction stage, you are not in position to hire. In growth stage, although you may afford, but you don't do so because you think that you can do it better or do not trust others easily. It's in the maturity stage when you start believing in people, you start working towards team building. When you have team, the workload is divided and thus you are not overburdened. Now, apart from team building, you also work on upgrading your skills and focus on adding advanced gadgets to your practice that saves your time further. With experience, you become more confident not only in treating patients, but you also improve on your interpersonal skills, communication skills, and you don't have to convince the patients much to go ahead with the treatments. If you continue to be in the maturity stage for a long period, you are respected as a doctor in the society. You may become an influencer, not only socially, but also in the dental fraternity. You also start getting more respect among the colleagues. Fellow dentists may call you for your advice, like how to manage a clinical situation or what is the diagnosis. Should I buy a particular gadget or should I attend this workshop, etc. Are you experiencing this situation? Just mark your score. If yes, it's 5. If no, it's 1. Now let's talk about the fourth differentiating factor, your priorities and attitude. In the maturity stage, your priority is to keep work-life balance. So you focus on organizing yourself as a person, as a clinician. You focus on upgrading your managerial skills. You focus on upgrading your practice. Your entire focus is on how to make your life and practice smooth. Now let's talk about your attitude towards patients. In the maturity stage, patients are ready to get treated at the value that you quote. Bargaining and negotiation go rare. And even if someone tries to, your communication and interpersonal skills do their job. Now, is this true for you? Please record your score. Now, let's talk about the key differentiating factors. The typical characteristics that discriminates maturity stage from other stages is that money starts working for you. Your practice is on autopilot mode. It can run smoothly even in your absence. The patients come to you by your name. There are more referred patients. You're not at all worried about the competition. In short, you are into the seller's market. Remember this from the first video? You have good social and personal life. In short, you have money, time, peace, and reputation in maturity stage. Even when it comes to upskilling or upgrading your practice, you can do it with very low risk as you are growing steadily and consistently. Is this that you are going through presently? If yes, record your score accordingly. Now let's discuss some FAQs. First, does everyone experience maturity stage? No, not every practice can experience this stage unless they follow some specific strategies. Now, what are these strategies is something that we are going to discuss in the upcoming videos. Second question, once I enter the maturity stage, can I be in it forever? No, you have to continue working to be in the maturity stage. It's like knowing how to swim is not enough. You will have to keep swimming to be on the surface. Third, what's my growth rate in the maturity stage? Well, it's subjective, but it's definitely less than that you have been seeing in your growth stage. The only thing is it's a steady growth with low fluctuation. Alright, now let's see the fourth stage, that is saturation. You may enter the saturation stage even after 3 or 4 years of starting practice. That is right after your introduction stage. In short, you can end up in saturation stage at any point of time in your practice. Let's see the first differentiating factor, the finance. In saturation stage, your finances get stagnant. Your income fluctuates like it's there in the growth stage, but the growth rate is almost zero. Your income fluctuates in the same range. For example, if it's in the range between 100 to 120, it will hardly increase or decrease. Most dentists in this saturation stage observe that there is stagnation in income and the year on year growth is almost 0 to 10%. That is, you just match the inflation rate and experience no further growth. Now, when it comes to investing in dentistry or your personal life, you are at high risk as your income is stagnated. Are you experiencing such financial status in your practice now? Please record your score accordingly. Now let's see the second differentiating factor, personal life. In this particular stage, your personal life becomes monotonous. After years of practice and patience, you may have to go through health issues like backache, eyesight problems, and even colorectal problems because of long sitting hours. You're more worried about your kids because by this time of your life, the kids are on the verge of completing their graduation or ready to take up their first job or to start their own business or on the verge of getting married. So you have to give more and more attention to your kids because they are about to take some crucial decisions of life which may need your guidance, and as a parent, you have to give more attention to them. Are you experiencing this situation right now? Please mark your score. Now let's move on to the third differentiating factor, that is work life. You get saturated when you start feeling something boring. Now, when it comes to practice, if you feel going to practice boring and doing the same thing every day, then probably you have entered the saturation stage. You get tired of patients doing the same thing, same root canal, same extraction. Now, getting this kind of feeling once in a while is fine. This is normal and happens with everyone in every profession. But if this continues for a significant amount of period, then there is something wrong. You start getting bored of the clinical work and you also stop seeing scope of upgrading your skills and practice. Now, another important aspect of this stage is you get too much dependent on your team. You depend on your team members for every small thing because you lose interest in practice. Now, as long as your team is doing well, it goes well. But the moment they start underperforming, things get worse. Now, there are some more typical signs of someone into the saturation stage. You get irregular in the practice for whatever reasons. Patients come to your practice, but they have to wait because of your unavailability. These are some common traits in someone into the saturation stage, and it eventually costs patient. Do you find these traits in you? Please record your score. Now let's talk about the fourth differentiating factor, your priorities and attitude. In saturation stage, your priority is your personal life, like health, comfort, and convenience. Your focus is on security. This is the reason most dentists play safe and avoid taking unwanted risk. In short, your risk-taking ability goes down. Now let's talk about the attitude towards patient. As I said, the priority is on comfort and convenience, and this reflects in your attitude too. I'll give you an example. Dentists in the saturation stage are rigid about their treatment charges. If a patient tries to bargain, then they don't even try to give any justification. They get irritated by seeing the bargaining and negotiating patient. They're like, my way or highway. This is typically found in some experienced senior doctors. Do you find these traits in you? And if yes, to what levels? More the traits, high will be your score. Now let's discuss the fifth thing, that is key factors. The typical characteristics that discriminate saturation stage from other stages is that you start feeling that there is no scope or limited scope in dentistry, and eventually you stop upgrading your skills and practice. You want to increase your revenue, but at the same time you don't want to increase your number of patients. In short, you want more revenue with less patience and of course without upgradation. Do you see these factors in you? Please mark your choices accordingly. If yes, the scores are going to be high. If no, then it's going to be low. Now let's discuss some frequently asked questions. First, I'm willing to upgrade but short of funds. Does it mean I am in saturation? First of all, let me clear that you may experience lack of funds in any stage. It depends on what kind of upgrade you are planning and what's your current revenue. It does not mean that you are in saturation. It's the feeling that I don't need to upgrade or upskill is sign of saturation. Alright, the second question. Once I enter saturation stage, can I bounce back? Yes, you can. Remember the difference between life cycle of butterfly and dental practice? The dental practice is different than the other because you can reverse it, you can forward it, you can delay, you can even avoid some stages. We are going to discuss this in detail in the next video. Now let's move on to the last stage of dental practice, decline. So there are two ways you can get into decline stage, natural or unnatural. Natural way is when you age or shift to some other business and don't wish to continue practice anymore. Now this is willingly that you don't want to continue. The unnatural way is that you want to continue practice. There is no age factor or other business avenues. Still, you end up in a decline stage because of maybe a tragedy or something else. No matter which way you enter the decline stage, the end result is the same, either closing down or handing over practice to someone else if you don't revive it. So let's understand the first differentiating factor. Someone hitting this stage naturally has enough personal savings to maintain a good personal life. But please note that here we are talking about income from practice and not the personal financial status. So in the decline stage, you start losing money. What does it mean? This means that your income from practice is not enough to meet your basic financial requirements and to keep the practice up and running. There is lack of funds to pay for the staff, rent and other bills from the clinic's earning, and one may have to pay for it from his personal savings. In the decline stage, there is very low or almost no profitability. Now when it comes to investing in dentistry, there is no satisfactory income to put the money back in the practice. There are practices that find it difficult even to break even. Now this financial breakdown is one of the reasons why many dental practices close down. Now if you experience something like this in the early 2-3 years of practice establishment, then it doesn't mean that you are into decline stage. That may be the hardship of the introduction stage. But if this phase continues even after 3 years of practice, then that's a serious concern and you might be experiencing unnatural decline stage. So it's a time to mark your score. Are you 3+ years into practice but experiencing such situation? If yes, you can mark your score as true. Now let's see the second differentiating factor, that is personal life. If it's a natural decline stage, that is when you do it by choice and give up on your practice, you will have a good personal life and enjoying having good time with your spouse and maybe your grandchildren. But if it is an unnatural, that is when you are forced into decline stage because of factors like a tragedy or failures or something like this, then your life becomes stressful. Your decision making abilities are affected and things may not go in your favor. Also, your health problems may worsen if you don't pay attention to it. Are you facing any of these situations right now? Please mark your score accordingly. Now, the next differentiating factor is work life. Let it be natural or unnatural decline stage. The irregularity in work aggravates to a great extent. You start losing popularity. You probably see no scope in upgrading. You start thinking that you have done enough and it's not worth it anymore, and you lose motivation to upgrade your practice. Since you don't upgrade and upskill yourself, you fail to be in trend. You keep on practicing the same old methods. All of this results in losing your popularity further and eventually you lose patience. Do you find these traits in you? If yes, to what level? Higher the traits, more will be your score. Now let's talk about the fourth differentiating factor, that is your priorities and attitude. If it's an unnatural decline stage, your priorities are just like it is in the saturation stage, but your risk taking ability is almost zero. If we talk about the attitude towards practice, there is a complete lack of motivation. You don't have any excitement to go to your practice. You start thinking, why should I practice? For whom should I practice? What will I get? So if you start getting these questions, probably it's a sign that you are in declining stage. Are you going through it? Just mark your score. Now let's discuss the key differentiating factors. The typical characteristic that discriminates decline stage from other stages is that you lack motivation to continue practicing. You don't feel like going to practice anymore. Running a practice, treating patients, and paying for your practice expenses may become a burden for you, and you simply want to get rid of it as soon as possible. And eventually you end up closing the practice, selling it off, or handing it over to someone. If you find this key factor significantly in yourself, then record your score accordingly. Now let's discuss some frequently asked questions. First, sometimes I feel like giving up on my practice. Am I going to be in decline stage? See, after doing the same kind of work for months and years, you may get this feeling that I want to get away from dentistry. But let me tell you that it's obvious. No matter which profession you are into, you may get such feeling once in a while. Now mark my words. Once in a while is okay, but if you get this feeling every day and it continues for months and years, then that means you are already into decline stage. The second question, once I enter in the decline stage, can I still have some scope to regain my practice? Yes, 100%. Let's discuss that in the next video. So this is all about the different stages of dental practice. I hope it must have given you a clear idea of all stages, and now your job is to find out which stage of practice you belong to. Let me tell you how to do it. If you see the last page of the assignment, you are asked to write down the final total score of each stage. Now once you write the score, the stage with the highest score is likely to be your practice stage. The stage with second highest score is likely the one to which you are either entering or exiting. Now you may have a similar score for two stages. If that's the case, don't worry, you might be in transition. And it's also possible that you did make mistakes while recording your score. If you have this feeling, it's better that you watch the video again and you will get more clarity. Now I know you might be having many more questions like, what should I do now? How to shift my stage? How to grow my practice? Which is the best stage? How should I get into the next stage? And so on and so forth. Have patience. I'll be answering all your questions in the next video. But before proceeding further, make sure that you have downloaded and printed the third assignment. Also, if you have any questions for me or any feedback, then do let me know in the comments below. Thank you.